Next up is one of the other key design features of this ship, called a massive hole, or a gantry. As far as the design philosophy goes, it is actually a gantry, but this was actually the very first piece of the hull I ever put together. The rest of the ship kind of expanded from this point outwards. At first forwards, and then it started to go back as well. So this is the first part of the ship laid down and worked out. And as you can see from the vehicle hovering above it, it is the docking area. Unfortunately, I had to mount the docking point in this little bit here. I would have done more to it, but this just houses the ACBs and the docking clamp itself to hold the scout fighter in place. But the idea was that this would be attached to the area behind it, which has been referred to as the cathedral-like part, or inspired by 40k, but I'll get to that in a second. It was just like, it was meant to be like have railings around it all over for safety. It was meant to be like access to more rooms and functional areas through here, and then it all runs back into this big area here, which I will be talking about next. But as I mentioned earlier, it would swing up an aircraft and then it goes really out the top of it, or it would have a submersible kind of thing, which could be dropped down into the water down here and then just goes sploosh into the depths kind of thing. But it is a very distinctive design feature that most ships don't have, like a massive hole in the ship. In terms of combat function, it is like a big spaced area. It doesn't care if shells hit this general area. There's a fair few blocks to draw fire, sure, but there's nothing super important here. Or at least there wasn't until I added some of the secondary casemates. But as you can see, I kind of like decorated that a little bit. This is meant to be like a little viewing area. It happens to hold some guns too to it, but that's just the general thing. Moving on, next section, the cathedral. Thank you for calling that one of my fellow mods on the Discord. Sorry, fellow admins. I didn't mean to say that, but yeah, referred to as a cathedral. It kind of fits, and I did install stained glass windows in it as well, so you know it does have that. Damo referred to this as like, was it the marker, or was it like a chaos thing? It's like, so yeah, he thought it was like a chaos symbol or something. When actually I loosely based it on like the marker from Dead Space, so it's like, you know, a bit tangled there. It's just a pretty design. It's a little bit coloured. Who really cares, right? And since I'm actually going to start dropping names now, it was Heismeister, who on his very first time seeing the ship called it a cathedral because of that central area. So yeah. Once again, this is an area like meant to be like a decoy area more than anything, like distracts, absorbs some fire. There's metal worked into its construction and heavy armor blocks. Sorry, not heavy armor blocks, reinforced wood blocks worked in as well. So it's a weave of low to mid-tier armoring, and plenty of spaces for shells to fly through unhindered, just in case. Also, of course, ablative armor in the form of the rest of the crew compartments underneath. But if we go inside, we can see some more features of this place. Please forgive this back wall. This is again like an unfinished area in general. Like, oh, there's a couple of holes there. Whoops. There's also like an exposed system here. That housed one of the secondary AI systems of the craft. And as the design evolved, the upper deck area above this was meant to house like a number of disguised small APS systems, like the ones based on the jackhammer that I mentioned. They were meant to be like in lots of equipment dotted around this area, and they would turn into. They'd just reveal their guns and start shelling everything. That was one of the ideas I had for it. Another idea was like to have like mounted on spin blocks on the side here, and then going down to between these sections of roof. And then if the enemy was on the far side, the spin blocks would ratchet up and have the cannons like poke up over the top of this area. So that was another thing. But then I went and evolved the concept. I added ladders. I put the dorsal mounted weaponry further back. I changed its nature, I added the bridge section on top of this, so things changed. And I just wound up installing a big battery of casemates on top of here, along with some AI detection systems as well. And then, as I ran into budget problems, I actually had to start stripping casemates out to get the funds to finish this design in the mad rush to get it ready for tournament fights. So that's why there's sections that have been blocked off by girders and things, looking kind of makeshift, like this craft is still under development, still being constructed, that kind of thing. I was very deliberate in making sure to not pull out the same ones on each side, so that's why it's also asymmetric as well, and make it look like there's meant to be something there, but there just isn't. Because that's pretty much the case. There was meant to be something there, but there now isn't. So, yes. Anyway, moving back down again. I just got distracted by that. This area, as you can see, it's like each cathedral window is opening onto a little side alcove or cubby. It's a pretty big area actually, which then opens up into this big central area with walkways along the sides and a lowered section in the middle with, as you see, a little ramp going up to the actual launch pad. If I'd had time to fully get this area decked out and decorated, then there would have been a mounting crane along the top here on a rail, so that would have shown how this supporting craft could be lifted into position and then just like dragged back down, and it would be actually held in this area somewhere along here, and that's how it would be built / modified / maintained, because each of these cubbies would have had shelves decked out with supplies and pieces of the vehicles or random bits of equipment. Like there would have been additional blades for the propellers in there, there would have been fuel tanks, there would have been cabling. This area would have been a massive supply store, and there would also been a swing attachment here, roughly, which would have been for any submersible craft to like ditch into the water to allow that to happen. So this thing, it had kind of like its own little sheltered alcove for launching submersible exploration crafts, or helping to get stuff up out of the depths. Like maybe a tow cable would have been in here, that kind of thing. It would have been fitted out. If I'd had time, I'd have also added like some steam-powered cargo movers and crane arms and things in here as well, like you know, little support machines that could run around on this decking to help move the supplies around. And there would have been a little crane in here as well, just to help lift supplies from this bit down onto this bit. That would have been important as well. But yeah, that was my plans for this general cathedral-like area. Just like, this is where the babies of the Phorcys are formed and customized for their tasks. That kind of thing. Now the last bit to actually note about this area, apart from the fact that there is also like a secondary bit right behind here with a additional anti-aircraft gun and access to the central stairwell, is this part here is the mooring / loading area. I would have added some piers onto this as well, but access from this deck goes down the stairs here. There would have maybe some supplies stashed away in the corner there for easy access, but in general, yeah. But this is like a central tunnel going all the way through. Craft could have moored to either side of this, and then supplies would have been loaded up into here and whisked away along the central bit here, just to get into the central area. I'm not sure if Damon noticed these. He went straight past them without making a comment, but these are, as you can see, spin-blocked doors. So this is how this area is actually shuttered when not in use. I just left them slightly ajar to make sure that there was direct access through this area to anyone wanting to walk around the ship while exploring it. They're also meant to be like a small obstacle for any incoming shells or missiles or things that try to go into this area. They've still got this little barrier in the way to detonate on. But that's a very minor thing. They're just decorative more than anything else. Hey dear. Right, moving onwards and upwards, we have the... I was struggling on the name here. The we have the dorsal fin of the ship, which is a bit of firepower in its own right, honestly. The stairwell ends here. There was meant to be a little bit of another platform here, which I was going to install but forgot about. That's why there's some doors leading nowhere, just there. And then the actual top of the stairwell here is here on this upper deck bit, where there's one of the anti-aircraft guns. So a little minor feature there. And if we go down here, oh look, it's all the way down to the bottom of the ship. If you're climbing down the ladders, don't lose your grip and fall. It's an accident waiting to happen. Victorian health and safety practices, everyone. Yes. Anyway, yes, moving on. The bridge area. This kind of evolved as I was working on the casemates, and I wanted a full battery of 8 casemates in the side. So as you can see, that's like I clustered them together here to keep them all above the workshop. Sorry, not the workshop. The vehicle maintenance hangar kind of area. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to lift this up a little bit more, and going to make it so that we've got the bridge up here. And this is, of course, where you see where I am. This is where all the chairs are in the ship, as it happens. And sadly, I never fitted this craft out for manual control. So, Dammer, that answers the question during your live stream. This craft was never actually fitted for manual control. It's just lucky you installed a basic ship controller, because that's the way the ACBs are configured on the paddle wheels and the spin blocks to respond to AI control. So that was the exact control system we needed to put into it. But yes, I use reinforced wood as the deck plate. I've come to love the reinforced wood, by the way. The black sections on this texture, how it looks on its side, as you probably saw in the walkways downstairs in the crew space. We go here, yeah, look at this, like these nice thick panels with more detail than just like pure wood would have. This is what happens when you get reinforced wood and turn it on its side. Same story in the vehicle maintenance area. I played around far too much with reinforced wood in this area. And look at all the patterns I made. Yes, I really like that stuff. It's great. All of this is reinforced wood in varying orientations and things. Anyway, yeah, moving on. Bridge. There was some mimic block work here in the windows, so you can't really fall out of these windows, but these windows offer no protection either. They're not glass, they're mimics. I used mimics to get the glass blocks into the shapes I wanted, and then I also mimicked in these posts as well to show how the window is structured, which has given a very nice open view. And I think very well suited to this ship's exploration role. It's like the crew working up here, they can very easily look out and see what's around them. Then the captain sits here, there's weapon controls up here, and everyone else just has lots of random dials and miscellaneous things. I would have decorated this area more, and I would have remembered to actually put sloping around the top of this bit here as well, but again, time. Two things of note though, because of how many AIs I installed on the ship. I installed these ACBs up here just in case. So whoever was looking at the ship could very easily go to this ACB and click on it and say, I don't want you to be shooting, so they'd go to the ceasefire ACB, which would automatically disable all of the weapons on the ship once triggered. And then the fire will undo that and allow the AIs to fire as much as they'd like to. So that's basically what's going on here. This is the bridge. Moving onwards and upwards, we have one of the deck-mounted cram cannons. There's no real story to this one. It's just like a convenient flat spot. That's why it's here. I know. That's a very mundane reason, but yeah, it's a flat spot. It's high up. It's got a lot of visibility for coverage, that kind of thing. So yeah, who knows? There was going to be a access to get up here with the. I was going to install like stairs to get down into this area, but unfortunately I forgot to. So, but that's why this front bit here is open, just like provide an access point to it. Moving onwards and upwards, we've got some of the detection systems mounted on the side of this central spire. This spire is wooden, but it's got a metal core to make it more resilient to getting blown in half, which can make it hard to disable. And we've also got ladder access going all the way up to the crowning feature of the ship, which is the top-mounted crane, as it's been called. I would have actually gone further with the crane motif because it really does look like one, but this is a case of like design the weapon system, then design the decoration, and not really looked at it again, unfortunately. But this is like a top-mounted missile pod, and because that was so big, then I stretched this part out of here, and it really does start looking like a crane. So I wish that was deliberate. It was not. It was kind of an accident. Though there was meant to be a small crane on the side to lift up supplies from like the decks far down below. That was meant to be a thing. Unfortunately, again, like time got in the way. So I'm quite happy with how it turned out. Now, what is it though? This is built on two separate medium turret bases, one on its side here, as you can see, and as you can see, there's missile pieces just there. And as we go in, oh look, an access door in the side, which is where in my mind, the missiles were being loaded in. So they just left the doors open because ease of access. This thing isn't meant to be in a fight, but that's where you load in the missiles. And this is well, some people on the Discord actually were looking at this, trying to figure out how it was put together. I'd be happy to do a video on that at some point. But this is a missile arrangement that I'm pretty sure I came up with, and has been slowly propagating through the FTD community ever since, basically. But this is like a triple stacked explosive rocket pod. As you can see here, it's like the individual missiles are fairly mundane. Five explosive warheads, short-range thruster, fuel tank, thumper head for a little bit of extra speed. I could probably put an extra explosive warhead on there instead. It'll slow the missile slightly, but eh. But it's firepower 975 per missile, and this thing has, I think, over 100 missiles ready to fire on demand, and it does so at a very high fire rate. So, yeah. And then, of course, on decorations, there's stairs going up to the top after you get up here on the ladders. And then there is a little control room on top of that as well. So that's kind of what this thing does. Let's go ahead and spin this thing. So there we go. And then you can see the entire thing is just like ratcheted down and is built up and ready. And yes, that's the bit we're getting to next, don't worry. I guess I will go and I might as well show you. So if anyone's actually interested in this, this is what it looks like without the armor on it. So yeah, this kind of stacking missile system is very dense. It can fire a lot of missiles out of a small forward area, and I really wanted to install this kind of weapon system on the Phorcys. It's built high up so that it rains downwards towards the target ship. So it's going to be primarily striking the deck and upper structure. The drawbacks, though, is this system is more complex to install. It is more expensive to install because of the extra parts required to get it working properly. And it also has some sharp limits on the nature and length of the missiles that can be installed in it. If you try to do this system with missiles that are too long, it'll flat out fail to work, and probably blow itself up if you're not careful. And that's because it takes advantage of the fact that missiles don't actually count as their own objects until like a few moments after firing. So there's a very small amount of leeway after a missile is launched before it counts as a collidable object. And this kind of launcher takes advantage of that to just like stack more missiles behind each other in a launch system. It's very interesting, but ultimately it's good for small missile systems only. Don't get me wrong, you can use it on medium missiles and large missiles too, but I mean small as in short missiles. Any long missile, the system just doesn't work. It's very interesting when applied to light craft though, or this is actually the origin of the anti-missile turrets that Razul started to use, and then from Razul's designs, some other people started lifting it as well, and that particular anti-missile turret has been spreading through the community, and that's why I say, like, I'm the originator, really, of this spread of this particular kind of missile, because I'm the one that built that anti-missile system in the first place. There are several things I can say I came up with first in the From the Depths community, but this is the one I'm most certain of. So, yeah, interesting little tidbit for you there. If you see an incredibly small anti-missile with like small anti-missiles 1 meter long, stacked behind each other in racks of like 2 or 3 deep, in the style you just saw there, that's my design. Okay, enough patting myself on the back. Let's get on with this. Right, moving on. Next up, this rear section is meant to be more reminiscent of a Victorian factory. So that's why it's got stonework on it, and it's why it's got these wider style windows rather than the cathedral, which is more pointed and stuff like that. And it's also got like more black on it. It's got the smokestacks, that kind of thing. It's also almost entirely hollow. You see what I mean about the roll on this thing? It's almost entirely hollow. I would have decked this area out with like machinery, like workstations, that kind of. I would have taken out the holes in the floor; they would have been filled in. But yeah, kind of like a workshop kind of area. So again, on this deck here, just like you get around on the outside, there would have been some APS guns mounted on the top here. And then if we go to deeper, again, there's another work area. This would have been filled with equipment if I'd had a lot of decoration time to flesh it all out, that kind of thing. So, you know, failed bits and pieces of this craft designer. It's like, there's a major hole in the floor there, and there's an access point there to the stairwell, which I forgot to complete because I was in a bit of a rush. Okay, yeah, enough of that. And then lastly, it moves out at the back here to have another cram turret on the back and a little observation deck kind of thing. Maybe this could be viewed as a kind of altar to the sea gods. I mean, it does have a little bit of a walking up to the altar on top kind of styling to it, but again, never decked it out. In terms of general configuration though, this area was meant to provide, like, we can see it down here, small weapons, but it provides tiers where they can be mounted generally all over the darn place. So this would have housed a lot of light weaponry for plinking things. As it is, it's just got plays host to some of the missile banks. I know I've not talked about these missile turrets in general, but I will talk about them very shortly because we're almost through this. But missile wards, this would have been gun decks, this would have been gun decks. Another system I was considering including was like some relatively cheap 400mm kinetic penetrator APS guns, and these would have been installed in this general area as well. And just kind of throwaway guns, very slow firing, but they would have contributed every so often to the broadside salvo of the ship, that kind of thing. So that's another weapon system that would have been installed. Or just flat out some more missile turrets. I never really nailed it down that much, but it would have been mostly APSs on here. Moving onwards and upwards, we have these things, the smokestacks. I started developing these things as the dorsal equipment over here, and then I realized, you know what, I'm going to make sure I at least get some medium missiles built into this thing. And so that's where they are. Those are the medium launchers, the heaviest launchers on the ship. There would have been more scattered around, but there were not. But I deliberately went with the smokestacks and played around with the smoke a little bit as well. As you can see here, it's like there's a thicker bit on the emission point, then it trails upwards, which is an effect I kind of like that I wound up with. And that's because there's 2 smoke generators in there. One of them is set to 6 seconds, the default length, and the other one is set to 1 second, and that is resulting in this thicker bit down at the bottom here before it starts to trail upwards and away. And I really like that effect on it. Oh, I also darkened them. If you're curious, these things are set to a 0.3 in terms of the grayscale on the smoke. So it's just flat 0.3 across the board to get a very smoky looking exhaust going on. That's the kind of thing there. But yeah, I wanted these big metallic constructs to actually be a weapon system, so there was a local AI installed in this bit here, which have been decked out as like some big piece of centralized machinery, probably a processing system of some kind. And I decided to take advantage of the fact there's metal here to house weapon systems. I will again flip them out and pause them so that you guys can see it. Yeah, given the chance, I would have actually taken these things and reversed the mechanisms on top of the turret's bases, because there is a flaw to these. They're programmed with a rear firing arc, because, you know, they've got the spire right in front of them. But the turrets are actually forward-facing, so that means they can, if you turn them to the left, they go all the way around, and then they can't actually rotate back to resting when they're out of combat, so they get stuck. They just like don't know what to do, so you have to swing them back around to the right and get back. I would have fixed that if I'd had some more time to work on it, and I'd remember to do so. But yeah, anyway, moving on. These rockets. As you can see, there's actually 2 missile designs. I'm not sure if Dammer picked up on this when he was going over this design, but he didn't actually show them unfurled in his live stream either. He just knew that there was launchers in here, so yes, moving on. What we have here is a couple of big frag missiles. Frag rockets, like, there you go. Massive amount of frag, a bit of fuel, short-range thruster. Some of the heavier weapons on the ship. Again, mounted high, very deliberately, to A, space them out so that they're hard to damage, and B, have them rain downwards towards the targets to deliver their kinetic payloads. Fun fact, a lot of the weaponry on the ship was actually kinetics. The crams were kinetic. The casemates are still kinetic, actually, they're still fitted with frags. That rocket pod up there was actually a pure kinetic until I swapped it out for a payload type missile instead, because I decided it would be more effective. And these are one of the few ones that have retained their kinetic based systems, except for these guys. These guys were always going to be kinetic because I really like them. Again, I'll talk about those very shortly. But 2 heavy missiles to try and break through some more stubborn armor. Every one of these turrets has an integrated radar to help them with aiming, so it's extra detection just to make sure. And then one of the more interesting systems on the ship is these guys, which, as you can see, is not your standard rockets. These are actually cluster rockets, or rather bomblet rockets. Yeah, bomblet rockets I think is probably the best way to put it. There's 1 frag warhead on the front, yes, but that's its pure bit of damage, except for some like impact damage. But also, interestingly, it's the only actual missile systems on the ship that aren't fitted with thumper heads. Instead, they've actually got detectors. Don't worry, they don't break the rules. I did clarify this with Dammer. This isn't actually a self-guided rocket, it can't steer itself, so yeah, it's not actually classed as a missile, it's still a rocket. It's just it can track when it's near something, and that's because it carries clusters. So that's why there's a lot of small launchers integrated in here. It carries a big payload of explosive mines. So yeah, this is another thing like meant to attack below the waterline. It'll dump these things when it's within about 100 meters of its target. Then the mines will activate and start saturating the area around the opposing ship with many explosions. Fairly powerful ones as well. 1,259 damage per thing. Another interesting note, by the way, is that I actually delayed the mine activation on some of these things. So there's actually a 3rd launcher embedded in the rotating area. So there's 3 separate small launchers attached to this cluster missile, and they activate the magnets a couple of seconds apart, so it staggers how quickly the mines actually go into towards the target, and that helps them avoid like the first mine blowing the rest away from the ship, kind of thing. So it makes them a bit more effective in saturating by staggering when the mines impact. Very interesting little thing, but yeah, they just dump mines all over the darn place, effectively. And also, I feel sorry for whoever is standing behind the system, because it also belches the smoke directly backwards when the launchers are extended, like they are. So yeah, that's the dorsal missile battery. Not perfect, definitely flawed, but includes some variety into the weapon system. And then backwards from here we just have, like empty hull space and a couple of the anti-aircraft guns mounted on the back. As well as a little bit of crosswalk here for general access, and I think this is the only part of the ship where you can actually climb out of the water. I would have added more, but yeah, that's the only bit that actually has that. So yeah. Also, I wouldn't recommend trying to use that shortcut to get across the deck when the boat's in motion, because it's directly behind the primary paddle wheel. Yeah, dear. Speaking of, let's move on.